We live in a culture that often worships youth and innovation while quietly dismissing the aged as obsolete or burdensome. Yet, there exists a group of people between the ages of 65 and 80 who quietly defy this narrative. These individuals are not simply old, they are refined, sharpened, and deepened by the weight of time. They are rare not just in their longevity, but in their character, their discipline, and their spirit. They represent not the decline of the human form, but its maturation. Their lives stand as proof that aging can be something far more noble than the slow erosion of ability. It can be the culmination of a life lived with intention, discipline, and courage. These individuals maintain a sharp and restless mind. They still read difficult books. They wrestle with ideas that challenge them. They listen more than they speak, not because they're unsure, but because they understand that knowledge begins where arrogance ends. They are not nostalgic prisoners of the past, but are present and forward, looking. To continue learning into one's 70s is not just admirable, it's radical. It says something profound about the refusal to become spiritually numb. While others withdraw from complexity and choose mental comfort, these individuals remain awake, mentally agile, and eager to grow. Physically, they've preserved something most people take for granted until it's gone: autonomy. The ability to get up unassisted, to walk without fear, to drive safely, to tend to daily life. This is no small victory. It reflects a lifetime of maintenance, discipline, and respect for the body. They do not seek to be 25 again. Rather, they aim to be as strong and capable as they can, given where they are in life. They fight deterioration not through denial, but through deliberate effort. Where others let the slow entropy of time take hold, they resist not with delusion, but with discipline. But what sets them apart more than anything is their sense of responsibility. Even at an age when society often encourages people to disengage and relax, they choose instead to contribute. They don't complain about the world while doing nothing to change it. They still see themselves as participants, not spectators. They tidy their spaces, care for their families, support their community. They haven't surrendered to bitterness or self-pity. Their sense of duty is intact, often stronger than ever, because they've seen first. And what happens when people abandon it? These people also understand that the world is not the same as it was when they were young, and crucially, they don't resent that. They adapt, not begrudgingly, but intentionally. That kind of psychological flexibility is rare at any age. Rather than condemning every new generation, they remain curious. They ask questions. They try to understand. That adaptability is a sign of humility, and it reveals a deep wisdom. The world is not yours to freeze in time. It moves forward, and the noble response is not to scorn it, but to meet it with grace. Their relationships are alive, too. They haven't allowed years of disappointment or betrayal to harden them. They forgive. They initiate conversations. They stay connected to their children and grandchildren, their friends and partners. They know that community is essential, and that isolation is not a badge of honor. They invest in others not to be remembered, but because they recognize that love is what makes life meaningful. And they do all this while quietly carrying the knowledge of their mortality, not in fear, but with reverence. Death does not frighten them so much as it sharpens their focus. It makes every act, every conversation more valuable. If you are 65, 70, or even 80, and you still live this way, thinking, moving, adapting, loving, giving, then you are not just aging well. You are embodying what it means to live well. You are a quiet, shining example of what human potential can look like when it is cultivated across a lifetime. You show us that aging is not a slow fading out, but can instead be the final crescendo of a life lived with purpose. And to the rest of us, we should not only admire such people, we should strive to become them. We live in a time when the cultural narrative surrounding aging is deeply flawed. Youth is glorified, energy idolized, and the elderly are often quietly sidelined, treated as remnants of a time gone by. But there are individuals between the ages of 65 and 80 who defy this narrative in remarkable ways. They are not simply enduring the passage of time. They are transcending it with strength, discipline, and dignity. These people are not relics. They are refined, sharpened by hardship, tested by decades of responsibility, and still standing tall. They are rare jewels in a society that too often forgets the value of what it cannot commodify. These individuals retain a powerful sense of intellectual curiosity. Their minds have not rusted with time, but remain open, questioning, engaged. They still read, they still listen, and perhaps most importantly, they still think deeply. They understand that to keep learning is to keep living. The easy path would be to retreat into the safety of old opinions, to surround themselves with only the familiar, but they resist that temptation. They stay informed, not just to pass the time, but because they still want to understand the world around them. Their intellect has not faded, it has deepened, sharpened by decades of experience. They preserve physical autonomy through discipline and foresight. Aging brings natural decline, yes, but the exceptional few do not submit quietly to it. They walk daily, stretch, move with intention. They are not chasing youth, but they are protecting capability. To get out of bed without help, to walk a flight of stairs without dread, to do one's own shopping or prepare one's own meals. These are no small feats at this stage in life. They are victories earned through years of self-respect and bodily care. The ability to function independently is not merely physical. It reflects a deeper commitment to responsibility, to effort, to not becoming a burden unless truly necessary. They continue to take responsibility for themselves, which may be the most defining trait of all. There's a temptation after a certain point in life to hand the reins over to complain, to demand, to let others carry the load. But the rare few do not do this. They keep their spaces clean. They manage their appointments. They check in on others rather than waiting to be checked in on. They embody the truth that responsibility is not something you outgrow. It is something you grow into. They know that to relinquish responsibility is to relinquish meaning, and so they hold on, not out of stubbornness, but out of principle. They adapt to change without letting it embitter them. This is extraordinarily rare. Many people grow harder with age, less tolerant, less open, more reactive. But these individuals make peace with the flow of history. They do not demand that the world look the same as it did in 1965 or 1985, or even last year. They update their thinking, learn how to use new technology, try new ways of communicating. They do not scoff at the unfamiliar. They investigate it. That capacity for adaptation is a sign of wisdom. It reflects the realization that the world owes you nothing, and that the intelligent response to change is not complaint but curiosity. Their relationships remain vibrant and meaningful. They do not allow old grudges to rot their emotional lives. They reach out to others, make time for family, reforge old connections, and are often generous with forgiveness. They understand that loneliness is not just a feeling. It is a form of spiritual decay. Rather than wall themselves off, they work, deliberately, patiently, to stay connected. They show up emotionally and physically. They do not expect others to do all the emotional labor for them. Instead, they invest in the relationships that sustain them, knowing full well how fragile and irreplaceable such bonds are. And finally, they confront mortality with courage and clarity. They do not pretend they will live forever, nor do they allow the knowledge of death to render them bitter or afraid. Instead, it sharpens their gratitude. It lends urgency to every conversation, meaning to every small act of kindness, beauty to every ordinary day. They live with their eyes open. They understand that a finite life is a precious one, and by facing death squarely, they become more alive than many half their age. These are the signs of exceptional aging. Not merely surviving, but continuing to live with responsibility, curiosity, strength, and love. If you are doing these things in your 7th or 8th decade, then you are indeed a rare jewel, an example of what we all should aspire to become. One of the most defining characteristics of those who age exceptionally is their unwavering sense of personal responsibility. While society often whispers to the elderly that they've done enough and should now rest, the rare few reject that passive narrative. They understand that meaning does not retire at 65. Instead, they maintain a deep commitment to caring for themselves and their surroundings. Their homes are tidy not for show, but because they see order as a form of respect for themselves, for those who visit, and for the life they still actively inhabit. They keep track of their medications, their appointments, and their obligations, not because anyone demands it, but because they still believe it matters to show up fully, no matter their age. Taking responsibility at this stage in life means refusing to indulge in bitterness. These individuals do not wallow in blame, nor do they lean on others for emotional validation. They have spent decades learning that self-pity is a trap, a comforting one at times, but a trap nonetheless. Instead, they confront their difficulties head-on. When something breaks, they try to fix it. When they're in pain, they seek solutions rather than sympathy. They do not expect the world to bend to their limitations. They find ways to adapt. This proactive stance is what separates them from those who merely exist in old age. They are still builders, still contributors, still engaged in the shaping of their own experience. This responsibility also extends into how they relate to others. They are careful with their words. They try not to burden loved ones with guilt or unrealistic expectations. They offer help when they can, and when they can't, they offer encouragement. They still feel a duty to be useful, not in grand or obvious ways, but in steady, humble ones. They may call a friend just to check in, offer advice when asked, or show up at community events not out of obligation, but because they understand that participation is a form of service. Even in retirement, they have not retired from being part of the moral structure of the world. Moreover, their sense of responsibility includes taking care of their health as best they can. They don't ignore symptoms, nor do they neglect the importance of diet, movement, and rest. They understand that while they cannot stop aging, they can meet it with discipline. They don't look for shortcuts. They understand that vitality at their age is the result of many small choices made daily, eating sensibly, walking regularly, stretching, staying hydrated, getting sleep. They do these things not out of vanity, but because they recognize the body as something entrusted to them. Taking care of it is not about avoiding death. It's about honoring life. Perhaps most telling is that they take responsibility for their own mindset. They manage their perspective with intention. They are not blindly optimistic, but they choose not to become cynical. They are aware of the losses they've suffered, friends who have passed, opportunities no longer available, strength that has slowly waned. But they do not let grief define them. They still cultivate hope. They still find joy in small things. They do not expect life to be fair, but they act with fairness anyway. This internal discipline, the ability to govern one's own outlook in the face of decline, is what gives them an undeniable dignity. Responsibility to them is not a burden but a way of being. It's the quiet decision made daily to show up with integrity, to be a source of stability in a world that often feels chaotic. They know that if they let go of responsibility, they let go of purpose. And without purpose, the soul begins to shrink. So they hold on, sometimes through great effort, sometimes through sheer habit, but always with conviction. They may not be able to do everything they once did, but they still do what they can, and they do it well. This kind of responsibility is not loud. It does not call attention to itself, but it is powerful. It radiates out into families, communities, and even the culture at large. It reminds everyone that age is not an excuse to retreat from the world. On the contrary, it can be the time when your presence means the most, precisely because it's rooted in years of effort, trial, and experience. In living this way, these individuals teach us something vital, that responsibility does not diminish with age, it deepens. And in that deepening, we see not just the strength of the individual, but the strength of human character itself. Those who age exceptionally understand something that many people miss, regardless of age. That wisdom, if not shared, becomes stagnant. They do not hoard their knowledge or experiences like private treasures, but rather see them as tools meant to be passed down. They mentor not by delivering lectures or imposing opinions, but through quiet example, through conversation, and through genuine engagement with those younger than themselves. They carry with them decades of trials, lessons, and earned insights, and they recognize the responsibility that comes with such experience. They do not presume to have all the answers, but they know their stories matter, and more importantly, that those stories can guide someone who is still trying to find their footing in life. These individuals do not mentor out of a need for validation, but out of a sincere desire to contribute something meaningful. They understand that influence is not about control, but about presence. Whether it is a young grandchild, a former colleague, a neighbor, or a struggling young adult, they offer what they can: perspective, patience, and a steadiness that is often lacking in a fast-paced world. Sometimes it's as simple as being a consistent figure in someone's life, someone who listens, someone who remembers, someone who cares enough to ask the second question. This kind of mentorship may not come with recognition or applause, but its effects are lasting. Mentorship at this stage of life is particularly powerful because it is grounded in humility. These individuals have failed, and they do not hide it. In fact, they speak about their failures openly, as lessons rather than shameful episodes. They do not pretend to be perfect examples. They present themselves as real people who have wrestled with difficult choices and who have learned over time how to live with greater wisdom. That honesty is disarming. It invites connection. It builds trust. In a world where everyone seems eager to project a flawless image, this kind of raw and reflective honesty is both rare and necessary. Rather than preaching to others, they ask questions. They invite conversation. They don't impose their values. They embody them. They know that the most effective form of mentorship is not telling someone what to do, but showing them how to live. When a younger person sees them handle frustration with grace, speak gently to a stranger, or return a harsh word with restraint, that moment teaches something far more powerful than a lecture ever could. Their lives become a kind of living instruction, a walking guide to maturity, patience, and resilience. They also understand that to mentor is to listen deeply. Younger generations today face a world of complexity and instability that is different from what came before. The exceptional elder does not dismiss this with easy comparisons or condescending remarks. Instead, they listen, really listen to the fears, the hopes, and the questions of those who come to them. They are not threatened by unfamiliar ideas or ways of thinking. They are curious, open, and thoughtful, and because they take young people seriously, young people come to trust them. That trust becomes the soil in which real guidance can grow. What makes these mentors so rare is that they continue to invest in others even when it no longer seems required of them. They could withdraw, choose quiet comfort, disengage from the next generation. But they don't. They keep showing up. They offer help when it's needed, advice when it's asked for, and silence when it's wise. They are not trying to shape others into their own image. Rather, they want to help people become who they are meant to be. This selflessness, this quiet form of leadership, reflects a depth of character that only time and intention can cultivate. In the end, Their mentorship is not defined by grand gestures, but by steady presence. It is in the handwritten note, the remembered birthday, the timely word of encouragement, or the patient reminder to stay the course. They do not view mentoring as an occasional act, but as a way of life, a form of service. And because of this, they leave behind something far more enduring than material success. They leave behind people who are stronger, wiser, and more grounded because they had the good fortune to be guided by someone who cared enough to share their life. One of the most striking qualities of those who age exceptionally well is their ability to adapt to change without becoming bitter or resentful. Change, especially in the modern world, can feel relentless. Technology moves faster than comprehension, cultural norms shift, and familiar systems are replaced with unfamiliar ones. For many, these changes become a source of frustration, even anger. But the rare individual who thrives into their later years doesn't fight against change as if it were an enemy. Instead, they recognize that resisting the flow of time is both futile and corrosive. They meet change with curiosity and a quiet resolve to understand it, even if it challenges what they've known. Rather than mourn the loss of the past, these individuals make peace with it. They remember the world they grew up in with affection, but not with the demand that everything must remain the same. They don't constantly compare then and now to elevate the past or diminish the present. They understand that nostalgia, while sweet, can become toxic when used to fuel discontent. Their focus remains on the present, not because it is perfect, but because it is real. They accept the truth that clinging to a vanished world only makes the current one feel more hostile. Acceptance for them is not about giving up. It's about moving forward with grace. They learn new tools and technologies not out of vanity, but out of a desire to remain engaged and useful. They may not be fluent in every new app or trend, but they make the effort to stay informed. They ask questions, watch tutorials, listen carefully. Their pride does not prevent them from admitting when they don't know something. This humility allows them to grow where others become rigid. They don't see learning as something reserved for the young. For them, learning is a lifelong process, and each new piece of knowledge is a way of maintaining connection to the world around them. Emotionally, they adapt by accepting the loss that comes with age, loss of friends, loss of physical strength, loss of old roles and identities. Without allowing that loss to define them, they grieve, but they do not collapse. They understand that sorrow is part of living, not a reason to stop living. They acknowledge their pain, but do not become it. Their resilience lies not in avoiding hardship, but in how they respond to it. Each time life takes something away, they respond by finding something new to care for, some new purpose or routine or relationship that brings meaning back into their days. They also make room for younger generations to lead, rather than clinging to control. They understand that cultural shifts are not threats. They are the natural evolution of a society trying to find its way. Even when they disagree, they do not mock or dismiss. They ask questions. They try to understand why certain changes matter to others, even if they do not feel the same urgency themselves. They remain open, not because they've surrendered their values, but because they've chosen to expand their understanding of what it means to live in a changing world. This openness does not mean they are without principles. In fact, they hold to their values firmly, but without weaponizing them. They understand the difference between being rooted and being stubborn. They can defend what they believe while still being willing to revise what no longer fits. They have seen enough of life to know that certainty is often more dangerous than doubt. Their maturity lies in the ability to carry conviction and compassion side by side, to stand for something without needing to dominate others with it. Ultimately, their ability to adapt without bitterness comes from a deep sense of security. They are not threatened by change because their identity is not built on fragile external things. Their worth is not dependent on relevance or recognition. It comes from within, from decades of understanding, from choices made with integrity, from relationships built on trust. And so they move through a world that is constantly shifting without becoming hardened or afraid. They remain supple, wise, and alive to the present moment. This is not weakness. It is strength refined by time. Those who age with exceptional grace understand that relationships are not optional luxuries but essential pillars of a meaningful life. As people grow older, it becomes easy to drift into isolation. Friends pass away, families get busy, and the pace of life slows. But the rare individuals who continue to flourish between the ages of 65 and 80 make a conscious effort to remain connected. They pick up the phone, they write letters, they show up to gatherings even when it would be easier to stay home. They understand that connection doesn't just happen. It must be nurtured, maintained, and protected. They invest in their relationships with the same care and seriousness that others might reserve for financial planning or physical health. They check in on old friends not out of duty but out of genuine affection. They ask real questions and listen with patience. They understand that a good relationship is built not just on shared history, but on continued presence. They do not take their loved ones for granted, nor do they retreat into self-pity when people grow distant. Instead, they reach out again and again, knowing that true connection requires both initiative and vulnerability. These individuals are not afraid to forgive. They recognize that holding onto grudges is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. With time and reflection, they have come to understand the complexity of human nature. They realize that most people are doing their best, even when they fail, and so they let go of past grievances, not because they forget, but because they choose peace over pride. In doing so, they free themselves and others to continue growing. This capacity for forgiveness makes their relationships deeper, more authentic, and more enduring. They are generous with their time and attention. While the world often grows impatient with the elderly, these rare individuals return patience in kind. They take time with others, especially the young. They listen without rushing. They remember birthdays, offer help where they can, and show up even when they're not feeling their best. Their consistency creates a kind of emotional reliability that is increasingly rare. People trust them not because they are perfect, but because they are present. Their word means something, and their presence brings comfort. They are also emotionally honest. Rather than hiding behind masks or playing social games, they speak with sincerity. They say, "I love you," freely, express gratitude without hesitation, and admit when they're wrong. This emotional transparency deepens their relationships, creating bonds rooted in truth rather than performance. They do not waste time on appearances. They know that at this stage of life, what matters is not being admired from a distance, but being known and accepted up close. That kind of emotional openness is powerful, and it often encourages others to open up in return. Another key to their relational strength is their sense of humility. They do not believe they are always right, nor do they impose their values on others. Instead, they create space for different perspectives. They give others room to grow, even when it means stepping back or letting go. This humility fosters mutual respect. It allows for relationships to evolve over time rather than becoming stagnant or strained. They understand that love, whether familial or platonic, must be flexible to survive, and they practice that flexibility with intention and care. In the end, these individuals maintain relationships not out of habit, but out of conviction. They know that relationships are what give life texture, meaning, and joy. Even in moments of solitude, they carry the voices and memories of those they love. They are not defined by how many people surround them, but by the depth of the connections they have cultivated. Their lives are rich because they have chosen, again and again, to reach outward rather than collapse inward. and in doing so, they offer the rest of us a powerful model of how to love well for a lifetime. One of the most remarkable qualities of those who age with strength and grace is that they continue to have a vision for the future. Even in their late 60s, 70s, or early 80s, they do not view life as something winding down, but rather as something still unfolding. They resist the common temptation to see aging as a slow drift toward irrelevance. Instead, they wake up with a sense of direction, with ideas about what they want to do, see, contribute, or improve. They have not retired from meaning. They understand that forward motion is not reserved for the young. It is a human need at every stage of life. These individuals don't always dream in grand, dramatic terms. Sometimes their vision for the future is quiet and personal. It may be a garden they want to cultivate, a book they want to finish, a skill they hope to learn, or a relationship they want to heal. But what matters is not the scale, it's the intent. The simple act of reaching forward gives their lives shape and momentum. Without a vision, time can become heavy and formless. With it, each day becomes part of something larger. They wake not just to exist, but to move towards something meaningful. They resist the mindset that tells them their best years are behind them. Instead, they ask a better question. What can I still do with the time I have left? This question is not rooted in denial, but in courage. It takes courage to keep imagining when your body is slowing down, when losses have accumulated, when the world moves in ways that don't always seem to include you. And yet, they do it. They plan, they create, they build. Not because they expect immortality, but because they value life enough to keep investing in it. Their vision is not selfish. Often, it includes service to others. They want to help someone in their family succeed, or leave something behind that matters, or mentor a young person struggling to find their way. They continue to care about their community, their culture, the world at large. They pay attention to what's happening not because they fear change, but because they still want to be part of shaping it. They don't retreat from the world. They engage with it knowing they still have something to offer. And that vision for the future brings with it a quiet optimism. It doesn't mean they believe everything will turn out perfectly. It means they choose to believe that something good can still happen, that their presence still matters, that the story isn't over. This kind of hope is not naive, it's disciplined. It has been tested through grief, disappointment, and hardship, and still it endures. That endurance is what makes it powerful. It allows them to look forward, even when the road ahead is shorter than the one behind. They also understand that having a vision requires action. They do not merely wish, they work. They take small steps, make plans, adapt when necessary. They understand the gap between desire and effort, and they bridge it with commitment. This effort gives them a sense of control in a world that often tries to take it away. It reminds them that even now they are agents in their own lives. They are not waiting to be rescued or remembered. They are choosing to keep writing the next chapter, however long or short it may be. In the end, what makes these individuals so rare is that they have not allowed age to silence their imagination. They live not just with memory, but with purpose. They know that vision is not the exclusive property of the young. It is a right and responsibility of anyone who wants to keep living, not just breathing. Their eyes are still on the horizon, their hands still shaping the present. And in doing so, they show us what it means to age with dignity, with clarity, and with intention.